And welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Jonathan Raymond. He is the CEO at Refound. He's the author of an award-winning book called Good Authority. In 2018, he was named one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers. And after spending 20 years trying to figure out if he was a business exec or a personal growth teacher, he stopped trying to figure it out. We'll talk about that in a minute. He created Refound to offer a way to help people develop personally and professionally at the same time. He's the former CEO of the eMyth and has led business transformation projects in technology, renewable energy, and the coaching industry. I'll mention here because it's in your bio, even though it kills me that you'll never give up on the Knicks, but we can talk about it.
I was at a conference and someone read that out and said any other Knicks fans in the room? It was 2,000 people, and then one guy raised his hand. So I had it was misery, exactly. A very small misery loves company.
I think the Knicks have given up on the Knicks. But anyway, welcome aboard today. Let's move to more interesting topics. So you've got I want to start with your background because it's pretty eclectic, from the law to being the CEO at eMyth to now leading Refound. So how the hell did you get here? Let's start with that.
I think I was talking with someone the other day, and I think the driving factor has been I've never been very good at staying in situations that I didn't feel inspired by. And so I bounced from a few different places in my life where I felt like, okay, this is all right, but my life is, life is short, and there's a lot of things that I want to do. There's a lot of things that I want to feel. There's a lot of experiences I want to have. And so I wasn't able to stay long, for example, in the bowels of a big Manhattan law firm. Even though I thought a lot of the work was interesting, it was just grating on me and I needed to do something else. And so I feel like that's a lot of where that eclecticism comes from, is feeling like, okay, this is a piece of what I want, but not the whole thing.
So I want to talk a little bit, because the only one off the top of my head that is in a little bit of a similar situation to you is Stephen M. R. Covey, who wrote The Speed of Trust. And what I mean by that is he was initially sort of the back of the house guy, for lack of a better term. He was the COO, CEO, whatever, of the Covey organization under his father, under 7 Habits and such. And then, 10, 15 years ago, broke out on his own with Speed of Trust and subsequent books. So one of the things I discussed with him when we had him on is sort of that, how did that help, knowing the sort of executive or business side of the house and then moving into a different lane of creating your own content, but also being cognizant of sort of the business side. So tell us about that transition, and in your case, moving from the business side of eMyth to your own content at Refound.
Yeah, for me, it was really, that was my first exposure. It was a real gift to me. I didn't have a background. I didn't come from an L&D background. I didn't come from an HR background, and I certainly didn't come from a coaching background. Although I had, personal experience and training as a counselor and facilitator. And so it was really that 5 years was an invaluable experience to me of seeing how a business in I'll call it the learning space, actually operates. And what are the things that you could do that work, and what are the things that are really difficult? And so, that business had been around for 40 years with all sorts of ups and downs, like any 40-year-old business. And it was through that process where, eMyth, for folks who are not familiar with it, they cover a really broad range of content for a small business owner. And it's really good content. It's been around for a long time. But what I realized is that I wasn't actually interested in the full range of that content. I was interested in a particular piece of it. And I was interested in conversations and how, the idea of, managers and leaders getting better at the way they talk to people and the way they talk generally, that's not a new problem. There's a lot of companies out there that have tried to solve that over the years. But that part of the business, that's what I learned was, well, that's really where my passion is. It's about the conversations between managers and employees, between leadership teams and one another, and the organization as a whole. So it really helped me kind of see the lay of the land of what are all the different things that I could do? Where does my passion really lie? And it also gave me a ground to experiment, frankly, in my own developing leadership style of what worked, what didn't, what did people respond to, that sort of thing.
So it helped you tune in and sort of find your lane, your voice around content that you're passionate about, but it didn't force you to say, and now go forward and start a company and write a book and go do this, right? So what was the motivation underneath that to, once you sort of found your passion relative to this sweet spot of the content that resonated most with you?
Yeah, for me, it was, the company was founded by, there was a very, very sort of well-known founder with a very famous book. And to me, I'm just not the sort of person who I felt really passionate about my own ideas that were different than the ideas. Had a philosophical difference the way I saw the world and the way that I wanted to treat people what I was, what I was, the company I was trying to manage. And so for me, it was really stepping out for the first time in a thought leadership role. Whereas I had sort of like the I was in the shadow of a very sort of charismatic founder who'd been around forever and lots of people knew, at least in the small business world, not necessarily in other worlds that I travel in now. But I was able to kind of be in the wake of that brand for a couple of years, and that was just to kind of get myself really to the place where I said, like, oh, you know what, I don't need that anymore. I can take the training wheels off and I can go do this on my own.
So now you're at a place where you're wearing two hats, right? You are the thought leader at Refound. You're it in terms of you're the author. You've written the book. You do the keynotes. It's your IP. It's your content, your ideas that have been codified into various programs and such at Refound. And you're still wearing the CEO hat. So tell me about sort of those challenges or struggles, because I think a lot of folks that listen stay in that place, or then they decide to sort of bifurcate the role, or sort of how's that working for you, and where does it work well, and where do you struggle with it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting moment we're having this conversation. Over the first couple of years, so I created the business in 2015, and in the first couple of years, I was wearing every hat. Right, I was wearing 17 different hats. And over the last couple of years, in particular, I'd say the last 18 months, I've brought on a team of people who are, just an amazing team of people who are holding pieces of that puzzle so that I can let go of them. And I think I'm in that place right now where I'm a capable CEO, but I'm not a great one, and I'm really okay with that. I wasn't okay with that when I was younger, but I'm really okay with that. I don't have the ego need to be the CEO. I really think of myself as more of the chief brand officer, if you will, like the thought leader, and that's where I want to be and where I want to live. And so I'm right at that place now where I don't know that I will replace myself as the CEO, but I will bring in a COO. We'll see how that happens. But I'm not actively looking right now, but to have someone who's really running the business, because I can geek out on the financial side of the business, like with the best of them.
Sure.
I love that world. It's fascinating to me. And it's not the best use of my time. I am the front of the house guy, and I love that role. I love being in that role. I like being out and talking with people. So I would say it's a I can see the destination where I'm not in that role anymore. It's not exactly clear how that transition goes. For now, it's working. I'm surrounded by an amazing team of people who hold their own, and that's just
Great.
the dream for me.
And I think you sort of alluded to it. The pieces that you give up are the pieces that you might be anywhere from mediocre to decent to even good at, but pieces that are replaceable, right? So we can't replace the role of the face of the brand or the content creator, et cetera. But you could replace ultimately marketing, finance, product development, a whole suite of things, but you have to grow into that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of the story of your journey, right? From when you decided to write the book, and then the book came out, and then it was marketed, and then here we are a couple of years later, sort of what the world looked like for you pre book, during book, and now in this sort of post book phase.
Yes. Well, I think one of the first things I did was I looked on Amazon at the time. This was in 2015, and I thought, how many books are there about leadership on Amazon? And I think at that time there were 34,592. So clearly there was a market opportunity for a new leadership book. But I just felt like I actually had read the one thing, and I think that's Gary Keller's book. And I thought, I'm building this business. What's the most important thing that I need to do in order to actually get this brand out there and share these ideas? And obviously enough, writing the book what came to the top of the list. And it was really actually a fun process. I feel like it was ideas that had been kind of burning inside of me for years, if not my whole life, in different ways. And so it really was like a birthing process for me. And I didn't have a platform. I had no fame quotient at all. When some people knew me from eMyth days, but very few. I was an unknown quantity at that time. And so I started blogging about these ideas, and the book came out, and I started to get a little following, and people said, "Hey, this is really cool." And then, when the book came out, it wasn't, it didn't go international bestseller. It wasn't I didn't think it would. I didn't, of course, everybody hopes that it would. We did win an award and we got some really nice, some press coming out around it. But, that didn't grow the business, right? That was nice. It was good. It was a nice validation. But what grew the business was that HR leaders started talking about us. And they, I think probably a lot of maybe not, maybe some of your listeners are in that kind of selling into L&D, HR, CEO sometimes. And they talk to each other. They're bombarded with marketing and cold outreach all the time, and so they lean on each other. And so what started to happen was we started to do, the first potential client who came to us said, hey, really love the content, love the book. We'd really like to make the accountability dial part of, our culture. Do you do workshops? To which I replied, oh, yeah, of course we do workshops. We're great at workshops. And so we designed a workshop and it went well. And so we had a good laugh about that. So we designed a workshop and I would say at every, to kind of come around on your question, the thing that has worked for us is listening to our customers, full stop. Listening to what do they want.
Yeah. So I want to push on that a little bit because it's
go ahead.
For some reason, and we can get into whether if that was strategic or opportunistic or just random, the HR, a certain type of sort of an evolved HR leader started to lean in. There's sort of a psychographic demographic of folks that leaned in. They share it amongst the community, and then they ask you for what they want. So I think it's sort of those two pieces, right? Because one of the mistakes that I see folks make early on, particularly when they don't have a strong brand or it's their first or second book or something, is making the mistake of thinking that wow, everybody could benefit from this book, which may be true, but unless you have the marketing dollars of General Motors or Coca-Cola or something like that, you can't afford to market to quote everybody.
Right. Well, and I think that it really comes down to the implementation, right? All of these companies are inundated with content, and and at the enterprise level, I mean, how much money has the Fortune 100 company of your choosing? How much have they invested in L&D or leadership programs in the last year? A ton of money.
Yep.
So there's no shortage of good ideas. There's no shortage of good books, but the challenge is how do you implement it and how do you listen to customers and you get out of your own way, frankly, and say, look, I know that, so for example, we would love to spend a week with leaders working on their, sort of innate, parental authority trauma. But no one's going to buy that from us, right? That would be a huge value. But if I went into our sales process saying, hey, this is the thing we want to sell you and everyone could benefit, I would be, I would be in another business right now.
Right.
And so it really comes down to finding ways to, without selling out your idea, honoring the idea, but how do you honor that idea in forms and formats and modalities that are really responsive to what your customers actually want?
So let's talk about that. So it sort of starts, the book is out there, it starts to resonate a bit, a certain type of client asks for things and you're able to deliver those. So that's cool, right? And now you're able to take sort of a strategic pause back and say, how do I want this business to look? Do I want to be in a workshop business, an advisory business, a consulting business, a digital business? How do you sort of process all the market data and the market intelligence and layer that on top of your lifestyle choices as well as your maybe, your sort of resource limitations and say, aha, based on that, I want to double down the bets over here and go more, digital and analog or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts by wasting a lot of money on false starts. I think that's like the first thing you do.
Waste a lot of money. Okay.
Yeah, step one, waste a lot of money on false starts. But I think, for us, it was, I spent a lot of time in San Francisco. I have a lot of friends in the people tech world, and I was really seeing a lot of that emerge. And so for me, it was sort of a double-edged, I was getting two messages at the same time. I was seeing this like explosion of people technology and HR tools and data tracking and agenda builders and apps and AI, all this kind of stuff, which is, it's exploding by the day. And at the same time, I was having people say to me like, hey, your business is awesome. Don't try to do what we're doing. We have tons of competition doing what we're doing. Like your business is great. And so I think what I ended up doing is taking I tapped the brakes on it actually. And I said, look, the business we have is wonderful. The lifestyle I have is wonderful. And, we're really enjoying our life and appreciating what we have. And we've taken a much more methodical and slower approach. We jumped at a few, I was joking, but we jumped at a few. Well, what if we build an app? Well, what if we build it or whatever? And I think we've taken a much more methodical view at this point of saying like, okay, we know let's start with the premise of what's helpful, and we have enough clients and enough business to keep us more than busy. What's working, and then secondarily, like, okay, how can we enhance that experience, or how can we supplement that experience, or how can we create a different lead into that experience using a digital product or something like that,
Yep.
rather than seeing technology or digital as a solution, but more as an enhancement business development tool, sort of filling out the thing that we're doing, because the thing that we're doing is great.
Sure.
And we worked really hard to get there.
Yep.
So that's really been the journey for us.
So I want to go a little bit deeper. I mean, you sort of made the comment, step one, waste a lot of money. How do we get people to go straight to step two? So what are the things, obviously hindsight is 2020, but what are the things that you would say to yourself, 3-4 years ago when you did some of those things, if you were to do it today, to maybe force yourself to think a little bit differently? Doesn't mean you might not make the same mistake, but what would you consider now being on the other end of wasting some money and time and all that? And we've all done that, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. No, I would say, I was talking with another thought leader in a very different genre the other day. And he said to me, what I realized in the end was that, keynotes and workshops, those like really good margin business. If you have it's like, don't look so poorly on that. So I think that's, there's something to be said for the tried and true, kind of thought leadership. Like that's good stuff, and don't rush to throw it away.
Yep.
But I think and I knew this at the time, but I didn't follow it, is like, unless you've got 1 million people on your list, if you're Brene Brown or, if you're somebody like that, if you're, Malcolm Gladwell or someone with a huge list, and you put out an online course, well, you're going to make some money doing it. If you're not, you ain't. And you have to build an audience for your ideas. And so for me, if it's not that I didn't waste that much money, but it was certainly painful at the time. But I think understanding that when you launch an idea, when you launch a book, you actually don't know what problem you're solving yet. You know what your ideas are, but you don't know. And we didn't know. And I wish that I would have had, I do approach it from a product design perspective, but I would have been even slower. I would have been even more methodical.
Sure.
I would have been even more circumspect and said, look, I'm not sure I know what this is yet.
Right. Well, and I think your point around, people get all stuck up, because not stuck up, but sucked into, because it's fun designing the app and this critical mass product and the digitization or whatever. But I think the basic question of, do I even have critical mass? Do I have a following? Right? Because I'm trying to sell some product to the masses, but I have no masses to sell it to. There's a logic problem there, right? So
yeah.
We start to wind down here. What are 2 or 3 little nuggets you might throw out at someone that's either at the same point in the journey that you are, or maybe 2 or 3 years behind you?
I would say when you get a client, right? If you're just starting out, right, or if you get a client, and it's like the thing that we know, which is that recurring sales are much easier. The cost of customer acquisition is much less for somebody that you've already done something for, who already trusts you a little bit.
Sure.
And don't worry so much about making money on those early clients. Just trust in the experience that you're getting. And you might think like, oh wow, $2,000 for that, like that's not nearly enough. And just it's paid. You're getting paid to learn about yourself. You're getting paid to learn about your business. You're getting paid to learn about what you're good at, and manage your cash conservatively, and listen and ask yourself, what is it that they're telling me in particular about my business? So for example, maybe they want to buy something from you, but you're like, no, that's not the business that I want to build. Like, you really have to question that. Right. And that's what I would say is, really just being merciless with yourself, really thinking like a product designer, not as a thought leader. That's how you get there.
Right. And I would say that your thoughts on what it might be or how it could be used are pretty much irrelevant. You have to listen when the market talks. And I think a lot of people, for some reason, are deaf to that information, and it's invaluable. I mean, it's just critical, and it's right there in front of you. But if you're stubborn and want to go one path and the market's telling you something else, kind of hard to fight the market.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. Well, this has been great. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate everything that you shared here. Good stuff. Good stuff for everybody. Thank you so much today.
Thanks for having me on.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.